very, very professional here. It's been a while since we've done these live sessions. Um, and hello, everyone. Happy midwinter to you all in the Northern Hemisphere and midsummer to you in the Southern Hemisphere. We got Sasha back on the camera tonight. um, so we asked our members, our wonderful, super patient members, to share questions that we could try to answer in a live session. And then we had a family issue come up and we needed to delay. And so we're finally back around to that. Really appreciate everyone's patience in submitting questions and waiting for them. And then just to take a second and say, well, appreciate immensely everybody that's part of this big community. And it really does feel like that. And for those of you that have chosen to be members, we appreciate you contributing that way and hope nobody feels pressure to do that at all. But it just feels nice to once in a while acknowledge those folks that have been contributing by giving a special space to have their questions answered. So thank you again, everybody, and thank you again, members in particular. Do you want to share anything? Or should we just get right into it?
We'll get right into it.
Do you want to be the reader?
Sure, I'll be the reader.
Okay.
I guess.
We've got our first question.
Well, I thought the first question should be, how's this from Kooky Jr.?
Kooky Jr.
How's the snow up there?
How is it?
How is it? It's nice.
Yeah, it's been pretty good. Well, you were moving snow today.
Very little. I moved a very small amount of snow.
But you're putting it into a high tunnel to do some watering with snow, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. So yeah, there's snow around here. Not a whole lot. We had a really warm day. It was actually in the high tunnels. It was warm enough to get like lots of sun, good vitamin D absorbing day, and then it'll get cold again for sure.
We've had a really warm winter. We haven't even had that much snow, but suddenly now it's like this beautiful carpet of clean looking snow.
Yeah.
And it was a sunny day, so we tried to get some vitamin D that we have not gotten all winter.
As you can very much tell. So yeah, thanks. That was a quick and easy one. All right, so
okay, let's start here.
Yeah.
I'll read them off.
Sure.
Rhizophagus Ramblings with RP Homunculi asks, I'd love to see a summary of your experience grafting. Well, maybe this is for a video more, with commentary on super compatible rootstocks. Not sure if you do too much of that, but don't hear a lot on rootstock selection and use.
Yeah, so basically a question around grafting, and I feel like the answer won't need to take very, very long because I have very limited experience with grafting. I've had some success here or there. As far as a nursery goes, it is not our specialty at all. We really focus on mainly growing plants from seed, and then to some decently large extent growing from cuttings and some stool layering and propagation that way. Grafting hasn't really drawn me in as a compelling thing to put a lot of effort into, but so far, Bud 118 for apples has been incredibly easy to graft and reliable, and it comes highly recommended by a lot of other folks, orchardists and grafters. That it's really vigorous and a nice large tree and really adaptable to wet and clay soils. So that's been one we've worked with, and starting to experiment a little bit more with facilitating the growth of seedlings from this absolutely monstrously huge crab apple that's in our backyard. We call it Ellis Hollow crab, and that tree grows with such extreme vigor and starting
Makes tiny little apples.
I mean, yeah, like
that the birds love.
It's an incredible bird apple for wild birds in the late winter. Not a human eating apple, but with that level of vigor, we're experimenting with grafting apples onto that, and so far they seem to grow really, really fast onto those seedlings.
And you did put all those different apples on the one.
Yep.
Did you say that?
I haven't. No, that might be something we try to document this spring. Is top working. Is that actually feels kind of special and compelling to me. Is we've got these random apples growing around and random pears growing that are cool in their own right. And grafting some of their branches over to different named varieties seems exciting. And I've been in communication the last week with people who have had really great success grafting gumi onto autumn olive, which is something I definitely would like to explore this spring. And if I do, I'll share notes on that. We'll make some videos because that would be really fun to be able to put a really special kind of like mild mannered gumi onto the really vigorous and wild autumn olives that are everywhere. So that's, I think, pretty much all I'd have to share with that in that regard for now. Do you want to do another
There's lots
question?
of comments on
Let's
this,
do a
but okay,
question that's
well,
for
no,
you.
we'll just go down. We'll go
Okay,
down the
we're gonna
list.
go
We're
right
gonna
down
go
the
right down
list.
the list.
Okay.
Okay. Anna Eckberg asks, I would love to see more of how you use the food you grow and wonder if that would be possible. It'd be interesting to know how you got into plants and permaculture to begin with and how and when you decided to start a nursery. And then the person, yeah, those are the
Then they
questions.
share kind
Yes,
words.
those are the
Um,
2 questions. Or I
well,
guess it's not
the first part would
how
be
we
for
use the
you.
food we grow. Yeah. I cook, like most people, a bunch of meals every day, but we I'm not that comfortable on the camera, so a lot of times I'll think like, "Oh, maybe we should film this," and then I'm like, "Ah, forget
Hmm.
it," right? Because I'm just not, yeah.
But I'm hoping that can shift. I mean, it feels like we've been saying that for years. I think once you get back into making a video or two,
Yeah, the longer I go without making one, the more it's hard for me to make one, and also we have a really tiny kitchen, and it's often like I'm running in and making food in the midst of stuff, and it's kind of a mess, but then I'm like, "We should just show the reality of life, maybe." And it's true, like, full sink full of dishes glory while I'm also cooking and feeding the dogs and cats, and
yeah, yeah.
I don't know.
I think that's good to see. Um, Sasha's been making these potato. We've been eating potatoes like straight up every single day for the last many weeks. It's been really nice, and that would be fun to make some videos on the different ways you've been cooking potatoes because you've there's a couple that are like really amazing hash brown style that just work well with different meals. So maybe we'll get
We'll
you.
make some potato videos.
We'll do some potato vids since we talked a lot about growing them. So um,
How did you get into plants and permaculture, and how and when did you decide to start a nursery? See, that's one to tell. Living in New Jersey,
yeah.
this
Um,
is your opportunity. That's a good story.
should
The origin story.
I wonder if that should be its own video at some
No,
point.
it can be its own video, but you could share that. Now it's just fun to
Okay.
hear. I like
Yeah.
hearing that story.
Well, so I'll give the medium length story about that is um I grew up in suburban northern New Jersey, Hackensack, New Jersey, with my mom and my dad back in the 80s, and had this really pretty rad and wild experience where my mom she just straight up grew food everywhere. It wasn't like she was trying to be, food not lawns or political about it. It just was for her, it just intuitively felt reasonable, and she wasn't really too worried about what anybody else thought and whether or not they liked it. And a lot of people did, and some people didn't, and she just put her attention towards people that did. And I remember she used to grow eggplants and tomatoes in the little strip between the sidewalk and the road. It was like this little median strip and like just suburban northern New Jersey. Um, and all these Italian folks would be walking by and plucking fruits. And so as a kid, I grew up with that experience, and um, it really laid the foundation of like, yeah, wherever you are, it's between you and the relationship with plants and the land that you're lucky to be on, whether or not you want to get involved in it, not whether or not other people around you are doing it or if it seems okay or comfortable. Um, so that's really the background that I think was like foundational for me getting into this work in general. And
For
then
him living in Trenton.
yeah, and then there was a short moment where I lived in a unique little spot in Trenton, New Jersey, with a guy named John Narr. uh, who was in his late 80s at the time. He was a photographer. He fought in World War II as a sniper way back in the day, and worked with Gandhi, putting solar farms in India. Like, just a really interesting person who experienced a lot. And I talked with him a huge amount when I was living with him. Um, and he, in the year that I lived with him, this was the year 2004, or maybe 2003, he just pushed nonstop. Like, you've got to get out of the city and get access to some land and start growing food. Like, he had a huge garden in his backyard, and I worked with him on that. We all container gardening because the soil was really contaminated in that part of Trenton. Um, but we made meals together and talked extensively. And that older man who was extremely um, widely experienced in the world just felt so strongly that I needed to get out and grow. Um, and so that kind of like pushed it to happen. Um, I'll probably make it its own video at some point and find photos, but the original place that I started farming was in Enfield, New York, and it was a mobile home that was a meth lab. And the person who was living there, who insisted that people call her God, was arrested for the third time, and so it went on the market really, really, really cheap, as you can imagine. And so I started my permaculture adventure by rehabilitating a meth lab home and all of the burn piles out back, clearing them all out and planting trees. So um, that's the medium length story of the adventure of getting into permacultures. And there's been this consistent theme of finding somehow landing in places where the access that I have is with land that would be considered marginal, sometimes extremely marginal, and sometimes just subpar agricultural land, and trying to figure out how to work with that. And that feels like the real sweet spot where permaculture as a concept or as a structure does its best work, is finding ways to have really beneficial and productive relationships with spaces that also need help, like doing the repairing work in those landscapes. Um, so that I'll leave there for now and take it as a neat cue to think about digging back through some old photos and maybe making a video about that first property on Griffin Road, right next to a place that burned cars, uh, piles and piles of cars in order to get the scrap metal. It's a pretty brutal place, health wise, and an interesting experience for sure. Um, so that's
Yeah.
there, and I hope that covers it a little bit. I got into it a little that time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's another in there. There's a little bit of a potato question we could tack on with the potatoes, asking if we hilled potatoes, and if so, what a material and tool.
Well, yeah, we hill them as we grow. Normally, just a shovel and with the soil that's in the road and the walkways in between them. I believe we may have documented that. If you search potato in our videos, there's probably a whole pile of videos where we're just randomly documenting that whole flow. But we don't do anything that's some particular magic trick that's that different from other folks who grow potatoes with hand tools. Um, yeah. So you ready for the next
Well,
one?
the next one is also about it's from AppG or APG. Greetings from Devon, UK. The only question is, will Sasha be sharing more culinary stuff in the coming year?
There's a theme here.
We'll
These
see.
people are
Two
wanting.
people, two people.
There's
But yep,
more and more. All
two
right,
people
so
want me.
many, many more. Three people. Aw. Um, so then there's one here from I'm not sure. Al
Ewan?
Ewan
I don't know.
Levine.
Ewan Levine. I want. Should I read it?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. This is a kind of a longer one. We're about to become stewards of a 5-acre open hillside property in central Maine. It was a hayfield for years until 2018 and has been kept mown, most likely conventionally farmed. Are you listening?
I no. I'm checking my
Because you're
email.
the one who's gonna have to answer.
Yep.
It's southeast facing. So I wouldn't know what to say. And the soil seems pretty sandy from superficial indicators. I'm wondering if you have suggestions for informative happenings to look for in the landscape that could inform us as we begin to get to know our land. I know it's common advice to simply observe new land for a year, but I want to get going this growing season. An example of what I mean would be to watch how water flows after heavy rains and to see where it pools or disappears the most quickly, or to look for areas where snow stays the longest. Are there other helpful clues to look for as we start walking the land this winter?
Yeah, that's a really, really great well, congrats on the eminent stewardship there. 5 acres, open hillside property. The theme of this question that I'm interpreting is basically some pointers on ways to observe land. And I think something to speak to directly is the, the statement, I know it's common advice to simply observe new land for a year. And I think that's really reasonable. I put a little asterisk next to it. I think if the idea is you have intentions to bring a bulldozer in to create driveways, or you're going to be creating a home site and there's going to be huge machine impact in order to create the home site, or you want to put in an acre pond. In other words, really, really large, very deep fundamental changes to the landscape. That constraint feels super reasonable and ethically appropriate. I think if you're landing in the landscape, one of the best ways to develop and deepen your understanding and get your observations honed is to start doing some things. Like maybe you make some raised beds, or you try sowing some cover crop seeds, or you put a couple of trees in on the boundaries, on the edges. Um, just one person's opinion there, but I think if you truly do absolutely no interactions in a landscape for a year, I feel like that's a lost year. So long as you're not going really hard with what the changes are.
But they're asking, like, what are you looking for?
Yeah.
Like, what are you paying it to know, okay, where am I gonna stick some trees? Where would I clear? What sign do I have that, oh, this is probably pretty fertile. This is maybe
Hmm.
more bare of
Yep.
nutrients. Like this is where I should put mulch. This is, where
Yeah. I think the most fruitful observations come during and after unique weather events. Like, okay, there is a really intense snow that comes out of nowhere, lots and lots of wind. While it's snowing, it's ideal to go around and walk and see what's happening. But immediately when it's over, what does it look like to take a wander? Does the snow really pile up in certain areas? Is it bare in other areas? In other words, you can get information from where the snow is being deposited. Where does it melt the soonest? Those are your warmer microclimates. Where does it stay the longest in the spring? Those are places that are going to be cooler for longer. Water coming down in the form of rain can be extremely helpful too. Just see, like, as you indicated, like, where is it flowing? Where is it pooling? When it pools, how long does it sit there? If you interact with that, if you dig that out a little bit more, how long does it sit there then? When you start digging in certain areas, are you seeing that straight up sandiness as deep as you dig, or is it transitioning? So a little bit of digging and working and suggesting water movement as part of your observation and interaction process, I think is valid and reasonable. Um, and probably one of the biggest things to do is start really putting in the work to keying out the plants that are in that landscape, that building an understanding of the names of the different plants that you see there, the different trees and the ground covers. Each of them will tell a story about their proclivities, and, like, these plants are, you're seeing creeping Jenny in this one area. It's like that. If we see that here and they're super green and luscious, then we know that that's nearly standing water 8 months out of the year. And creeping Charlie tells me that there's high fertility there. There's poke root growing. Well, what size does it get to? That tells you how much fertility is in that area. Though those sorts of characters can each tell you a very, very deep story about what's going on. And I think it's good to know the names of as many of the beings that are living in the land that you're stewarding anyway. Um, do you have thoughts on that too? I don't want to just
no, I
completely.
don't it's hard. I don't even know what you said because somehow with this
Oh, wait a minute.
with the screen
Yeah, it's
with the
hard. It is.
screen and here, like, you're talking to your own image is
Yeah.
weird.
Well, and
I
also
get I'm like, I don't know.
it's awesome. People are writing a whole lot as we go, and that's sweet. Um,
You're not even looking at it though.
I well, it's I mean, it's finding that balance between like being present with what we're talking about, and then also like, oh yeah, these people are saying stuff.
Yeah,
So bear with us as we figure it
yeah.
out. But anyway,
We'll hope you did a good job on that.
let's
I
hope
bet you did a great job.
we can review it later or not. Let's see. Ooh, another Sasha.
Uh,
I think that one.
no,
I'm.
this is both of
That's
us.
for both of us. Okay.
Britea? Any recommendation? I don't know if I pronounced that
Bretta
right.
or
Oh,
Bretea.
Brettea? Brett,
However, BRE.
Brett A. Brett A. Britea? I'm not sure. Any recommendations from your experience on plants that have an exceptionally high ratio of food produced per amount of effort input? Thanks. Hmm.
You thinking of any?
Well, like perennial plants
I mean,
or
what come? I have some that come to my mind, but I'd be good to hear your thought because you're the one that works with the plants to have them be our food, so that really matters.
you can say what your first thoughts were.
I would think nettles would be way up there. Stinging nettles.
Really?
I mean, no, I wouldn't
A
think that.
high ratio of nutrition per food for sure, but you have the window that you have is like not that long before they go to seed.
Yeah, for
Well,
fresh.
I guess if we were more on top of our game, we'd get a lot more out of nettles, fresh nettles, and then drying nettles. Last year, we did a pretty miserable job. I did, as far as getting them before they had gone to seed
Yeah,
to dry
they
for
go
tea.
to seed real fast. I'm just thinking effort input. We
Yeah,
planted
no
nettles
effort,
8 years ago, and
no
that's
effort,
it.
and a ton of food. Whereas like the potatoes, we're eating them every single day. We have just basement full of potatoes, and it's really keeping us alive. But they were a lot, tremendous amount of effort, really.
Mhm. In general, perennial vegetables really hit the mark of high ratio of food for actual effort.
Nettles,
The nettles
yeah.
do. I mean, Good King Henry, like we planted a handful of mother crowns, a bunch of. We don't do anything with them other than you get Good King Henry when you want to cook something
Right,
like
I guess, but
spinach.
it does like the effort the planting effort is more minimal. The harvesting effort, which is all on me, is actually tremendous with good King Henry.
Hmm.
Like it's slow. They're
Hmm.
not like to get enough good King Henry to have like feel like you have a lot of greens.
Hmm.
It's so nutritious. It feels amazing in your body, but I'm out there picking leaves for a long time.
Yeah.
Although I could probably, if you had a big enough patch, then you could just
Yeah.
chop a bunch and then it'd be a lot faster, I guess. But we have like two plants here, one plant over here, another plant here. So I'm like going all over picking leaves.
Yep. Yeah, like erring on the side of experimenting with all these different plantings. That's sweet and that's fun. But then, yeah, for production, that's something for us to move towards is what does it look like to have, a really solid block of profusion sorrel that you can go out with a knife and just poof, get a whole bunch for doing
Yeah, so I guess
sauteing.
that's actually a really good question because there's a lot that goes into that. A high ratio of food produced per amount of effort input. Your amount of effort is very determined by your own design of where those plants are, how dense,
Mm-hmm.
how you're harvesting. Our systems could use improvement as far as having the harvesting have less effort probably. And then
Yeah.
yeah, and then those green plants would have more like dandelion, green, all those, the chickweed, the this, that. There's very little to no effort in the growing, but there is effort in the harvest.
Yeah. Yeah, there's this trade-off of, you know, our layout trends always towards more wild mimicry of, a little here, little there, little here, which
It
can
feels nice,
it feels really nice. It
sort
feels
of.
it feels
It
really
feels
wild.
half nice and half chaotic.
Yeah, it has a lot of resilience in having a couple here, a couple there. If disease happens or herbivory happens or something happens, whatever, we've got 5 or 6 patches. That's great. But then the resilience sometimes bumps up against efficiency,
Mhm,
whereas if it was just one straight row, we'd go through in a faster way.
mhm.
But one layer to add to this that we didn't mention. So herbaceous stuff, that's great. But I would argue black walnuts for the fact that
Oh.
we have never planted. We
Mhm,
have some that are planted, but
mhm,
by and large, we just go and pick up black walnuts. We clean them, which is some effort, but the amount of total food and for how long that lasts, like the walnut harvest will be good for 3 years or 6 years in storage. Um,
mhm,
that's an interesting question. It kind of like opens up a whole bunch of
mhm.
more to talk about in a way. Um,
I know, I feel like I could talk about that I could think about that question for a long time and then talk about it for a long time, so maybe we should actually try to have a video more broad about that question.
I think putting more effort in the spring in making videos that show the reality of your harvesting and comments on what works and what doesn't and design considerations of what has worked for us and what things we would have done differently. Um, that kind of stuff would be, I think, pretty helpful for our own process too. Um, should we do another one?
Sure.
Hopefully that's gets you in the ballpark of what we're thinking. We give you like 3 examples.
Well, should we give a few more?
I think it feels like we touched.
I mean, for the annuals, the squash, the tomato squash, tomatoes, potato, those are our main
Yeah.
kind of things, canning the tomatoes.
Winter squash. I mean, Waltham butternut squash is a pretty high amount of food for how much effort we put in, because generally we just push the seeds in
And
and
don't
weed
do
once or
much
twice, and then
else.
we come and get the
And we have now
yeah,
tons of the dogs are eating squash every day. We're eating squash a
yeah.
lot of days. Um,
Oh, JD Van Allen became a member. That's lovely. Thanks, JD. Cool.
okay, Brees DJ Pancake. Nice.
All right.
Um, what advice would you give to a younger couple interested in buying land on the cheap? How do finances work for us? I know you don't have off homestead jobs, but hearing more about the mechanics of how you live so frugally would be awesome. For instance, do you keep a regular budget? If so, how much do you allocate towards certain things per month? We do not keep a budget, but we are frugal.
We are frugal.
We are not cheap, but we are frugal.
Yeah, I think that's a
I
really
think
yeah, that's a good distinct. Yeah,
we
because
just kind of know what we have and we are careful about what we do, and we did not buy land. We did not buy a house. We live in a house that was a house that my grandma owned and rented out. She passed away and left the house to my mom, and we live here and pay all the taxes and all of that stuff, but we do not have a mortgage. So that is a very different thing. If we move out of here, my mom will sell the house and have the money, and whatever we put into it is just that's what it is. But so that's one thing. When we met, Sean was well, you bought the trailer,
mhm.
and then you sold the trailer. You bought the trailer, and what do you and that was you bought it for a very little amount of money, and you worked up the property in a way that you sold it and made money.
Yeah. Yeah, and I sold it to people that were I didn't make a lot of money, but I made it worth the it compensated me for putting in the effort to renovate that. Well, I mean, I guess the theme of what we're getting at is that I feel like there are alternative pathways towards access to land, other than the straight up, pop on Zillow and try to find land that matches your criteria and buy it, retail market, so to speak.
Sorry, I thought
Um,
I unplugged it.
no, it's okay. Um, uh, Questions that I would have would be, can you explore options of getting onto land with family? Are there friends that you have that have land already that you can get along with, that you can come up with like really thoughtful, balanced, safe criteria for what it looks like to share land? Are there older folks in the area that have more land than they can manage? Are they interested in partitioning some off or having some sort of 99-year lease? In other words, there's so many interesting other pathways to explore before you strike out and buy land for X thousands of dollars
Mm.
per acre.
Yeah, we also have zero point 0.6 acres. Like we don't have like dream. It's very, very wet. We don't, it's not like
Yeah.
a dream property, but it's amazing that we get to be here and
Yep.
be doing what as much as we can, and I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so the that's the main arc of our answer to that question is what are some creative ways to not buy land, to find or to buy into land or rent into land. If you're thinking of buying your own land, that's wonderful. Go for it. Some considerations. Number one, there may be higher value in looking for land that has more total topographical change in the land overall than being completely flat, and is not a an open agricultural mode or annual tillage regime farming context when you purchase it. Flat agricultural land tends to be pretty expensive, whereas undulating, hillier land that has lots of forest cover is generally less expensive. And the second one often has more water resources that are in that landscape. You have the innate resources of the trees themselves that can just remain as they are, or if needed to be cleared, are sources of firewood and mushroom logs and millable timber, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all these additional yields that come from selective, careful, partial thinning of a more hilled landscape. And you have the total benefit of it being less expensive overall. Um, so that's something to consider. But yes, explore and uh, exhaust the opportunities of not having to explicitly buy land on your own first would probably be the biggest thing. Like, could you hop in on a land purchase with friends?
Yeah, JD Van Allen said, "I helped a family out for years and I've signed a long-term lease for $1 a year. It's marginal land, but I get access to tractors and sawmill."
Yeah, and I think wherever you live or wherever you aspire to live, a really potent pathway would be having as much conversation as is possible with as many people as possible about what you're hoping to have happen. Like if you're at the hardware store, if you're at a meeting, or you go to church, or if you go to school, or whatever it may be, to share with people what you're looking for and describe what sort of farming aspirations you have, and then community can be part of the discovery process too, rather than hitting refresh on Zillow or Craigslist or something like that and being on your own in that process. So I generally find the more I share with people what it is that I'm hoping to see manifest, as awkward as it might sound when somebody's like, "Hey, how are you? What's new?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm good. I'm looking for round bales of mulch hay." Then it's like very often that things manifest when you play it that way, and when you can offer information to others when they mention those random things too, and we build community and more resilience that way, and hopefully avoid having to have huge multi-generational debt loads to massive banks, which would be the ideal.
Yeah,
um,
we actually do have friends who g got a loan to buy their house by sending out to all friends and family, "Would you be willing to lend us anywhere from," what was it, maybe
it's like 500 to
to
$10,000 or
$10,000,
something.
and, like, asked how long they would need it to be paid back in, and they were able to get enough loans from people friends and family without interest stipulations that they got had to take out way less from the bank.
They cut their mortgage to the bank in half, and they have a community indebtedness, but they have communication with community, and they're paying people back in the order that the people need to be paid back. And we engaged with that too. We shared money with them with the idea that they can pay it back to us, and maybe depending on our financial picture, when that time comes, they can pay it forward to someone else who's trying to get onto land too. So we as community have an opportunity, and maybe not an obligation, but something in that realm, to facilitate access for each other, with each other. Um, the pathways that are put forward for us by the system at large are extremely extractive and extremely punitive and pretty heartless. So there's work that we can all be doing to support other folks getting on land to do regenerative work. So that could be its own conversation in other videos too, and I'd love to hear other thoughts too. Um, Good question.
Mm.
So, and
Oh,
then
and this
yeah,
what culinary and fermentation related plans do I have in the new year?
Ooh.
Mm. Um, I don't know. I don't know that I
More
ever I
ferments.
don't know how many plans I ever really have, but things just come about. But I always do some things each year, the same types of things. Like I did make last year, I took a really long time to make our big ferment for to get us through the winter. I didn't actually even do it until like early February with radishes that were in the root cellar, and it was did great. So this year I did it earlier. We've already gone through 2 big jars of ferment, so I am going to make another one with more radishes that we have in the root cellar. And I would like to make some miso. That's something that I used to do, and I haven't done it in quite a while. So,
Hmm.
someone said tempeh. Actually, I would love to make tempeh. That's one I've never done because I've never gotten the spores that you need for that. But maybe there's a place to get them now more easily.
I
I
hope.
have made natto, and I would maybe like to do that again because it's
Oof,
got that vitamin K too
that one's
that you need.
special.
Uh,
That's a funky,
and
interesting.
yeah, I don't know.
I liked it. It
We'll
was
see what
strange.
else. Yeah, what else?
The miso would be really exciting. You
Yeah, the
made miso a
miso.
number of years ago, and I loved being able to put miso, like a big thwack of miso on the side of every, not but most plates, and that, like, when I desire salt, I don't add salt. I add miso, and it just feels really good in the body. Um, and I recall it being an easy process because I did absolutely no work.
It wasn't a difficult.
I
I
just
mean, I probably
watched.
didn't do an amazing job, but
No, it was
I
good
did a good
miso.
enough job that we could eat it. But I never have made the koji, which you need to make the miso. I have always ordered it from this place, Rhapsody Natural Foods, but I would like to make the koji because it's supposed to have a really amazing scent when you're making it. So maybe we'll see.
Hmm.
We shall see.
We shall see, and hopefully we'll document some things and share them.
Hopefully
We'll
we
have to
will.
see.
Hopefully we will.
Um,
I
that
think this
one's
is just
yeah.
okay. Trumpeting angel. I'm in a new property on a busy road. Fortunately, the front yard is very big. I'm planning to watch whatever you have on creating the living wall. Oh, that's not a question. Oh, this wasn't a question, but then they have a question. Okay, I have a question. Which of the plants that you've used would you suggest for a steep hill? My property drops off quickly from the road. Thank you.
Yeah. So the context there is, it's a big front yard, busy road. It's well, we don't have so much a big front yard, but we live on a very busy road, as a lot of people comment. And so, in the theme of the living wall, and also, um, that they get pretty flooded after rains in that context. So steep near a busy road gets flooded, and with the exception of the steep, that's what we've got is really easily flooded. We get water inundation all the time through our chicken yard, which put tons and tons of trenches in order to manage that. Um, what can be added for a living wall? Yeah, I mean, the easiest to say right off the bat, and you mentioned it, is willow. I think the most important thing to say with a living wall, or with anything in the realm of a plant-centered solution to a problem, the answer would ideally have lots and lots of characters involved, rather than saying, yeah, willow, just load it with willow, you're done. What would it look like to have, um, a really dense set of cuttings of willow? And if we could do it over again, we might do willow that are very closely planted, at angles back and forth so that they can be woven. I think that would have been a little bit more effective than just like sticking the cuttings in back in the day. Um, Depending on the amount of light that you have, the context you're describing would be potentially really appropriate for elderberry to explore. Alder could probably fit in there. Really, really wet tolerant, fast growing plants. They would need good amount of light. Aronia is really quite beautiful and super wet foot tolerant. Poplar would be another one that, again, fast to establish, and do their work. Miscanthus, we found, is a really nice ingredient in our living wall and remarkably tolerant of high water conditions periodically. But our miscanthus in our living wall is dying very it's dying off pretty rapidly now because there's so much other activity. They're not the central feature, they're not the full light character, so they're waning, and that's fine, but that could be something to put in so that in the first few years you've got a really nice, beautiful, contiguous line while the other members are getting involved. Can you think of any other characters?
I'm sorry, I was paying
Oh
attention
yeah,
to
that's
the
fine.
side panel a little bit.
Red bud would go in really nicely.
Yep.
Currants can do well. Basically, cast of characters that work for high water next to a busy road. Basically, our context. I'm just more or less rattling off some of the members that I remember being in our living wall. But we, at this point, I would guess if I could put the time in, we have no less than like 25 or 30 different characters that are all part of the living wall situation between us and that busy road.
Steep hill
Um,
knotweed.
yeah, there you go. Put some knotweed in there. I mean, that can handle extreme wetness, and although they're herbaceous and they're really only green for like 90 days in our area, um, pretty rad plant for holding soil together and filtering out toxins. And so much hate going against that one. So, oh well.
They're good for
Um,
Lyme.
yeah, no, nice Lyme medicine. Um,
CryptoKid 808. Is there any licensing required to sell these plants as a small scale nursery? And do all your online sales go through Squarespace?
yeah, really straightforward question. Thanks for asking that. So to answer it in a pretty full way, licensing to say is it required? I wonder. I so we have a nursery license through the Department of Agriculture and Markets for New York State. That's licensure that is part of this state. We're in New York State. Um, what is it in every state? I absolutely couldn't speak to that, but I'm guessing there's something in vaguely in the realm of that for every state. It's $100 for 2 years, so $50 a year. And what's involved in that is a state agent will randomly show up to the nursery at some point throughout the year to do an inspection. They've only ever been pretty polite and easygoing and answered questions. They haven't been really harsh or hard on us, and they've been nice. Um, I don't know. I keep paying it, but the only time I've ever been asked for a nursery license was for doing local plant sales at larger venues. They say you need to have it, but even then we brought the nursery license and no one ever asked for it. So would we even need it to sell online, to ship from where we are? I truly can't say, um, and I wonder a little bit. So for $50 a year, it feels reasonable to have it for us. We're open for business. We're definitely a public facing business. If I were starting a tiny nursery in a rural area and just feeling it out to see if there's something I wanted to develop as a business, I would wonder pretty thoroughly if I would want to start by being registered and licensed and all that stuff. So, um, all of our online sales, if people place orders on the website, do go through our Squarespace, and then we handle side orders with people via email, and just we ship them and that kind of thing. So it's it's all grown very informally and somewhat haphazardly, and we've tried to err on the side of being generous with keeping our prices low and sending lots of plants and being really communicative to folks. And so we haven't hit any issues where people have been upset with that path that we've taken. And I think as long as you're like upright or forthright and upfront about what you're doing and what you're trying to accomplish with people and you're communicative, then you can handle it however you do, and then crossroads when you get to them. So, but yeah, if you're keeping it small and where you are, try just selling on Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace, and then um, if it's an issue, someone will knock on your door and say, "Hey, it's an issue," and probably will have you fill out a license. That's what I heard from a friend who was doing it for years and years, and then someone came by and said, "Hey, you can't do that without a license. Here's the thing," and then they filled it out and did the license. So. Um, Yeah, so that is that question.
Samuel Taylor member.
Hey,
Thank you.
Samuel Taylor.
Thanks.
Lovely. Thanks for being part of our community too. We really appreciate it. And I should
Um,
say we're trying. I hope folks can
we'll
understand.
see how long it takes us to get through these, and then we'll go back through this, I think, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Because and see how much steam anybody else has to keep listening to
Yeah.
this. Okay, are you ready for my next
Oh,
one?
we are ready.
Dave Taylor. I'd love to hear or see in the future any experiences you have with HeartNut, how they've produced, grown, or growth, pest resistance, hardiness, the whole shebang.
So Heart Nut deep
HeartNut.
dive.
Wait, are heart? I never Japanese walnut, HeartNut, and the other one
Bitter nut or butternut.
butternut. Which
They're all kind of ish the same
which is
ish.
the one that we have tons of that you were like, oh, we should.
We have a lot of butternut,
Okay, not heart.
which is close to heart nut, but not
It's
exactly.
HeartNut though, or Japanese walnut. Which is the one that I like the most?
Japanese walnut.
Okay.
And Japanese, there's like this whole continuum, this whole realm of that family that I could be misspeaking on this. And if I am, and someone's hearing me and they're a real heart nut expert, please correct me. I'm very open to that. But what I understand it to be is that heart nut, it's a walnut type that is generally a spherical, relatively small nut. It's easy to come out of the husk.
Do you have
And
any over there?
I don't think we do. The last time they cropped heavily in this area was 2016. Um, what we've been working with quite a bit, and I feel like we're falling in love with, is the Japanese heart nut, which is somewhere between a heart nut and a butternut. They crack pretty easily with the master nutcracker. The flavor of the nut meat is really, really nice. Um, and they're really pointy. And so when you crack them, you can actually use the point to as a nut pick. Um, we've planted a bunch of Japanese walnut, some heart nut, and English walnut, and it's still a question mark how well they're doing. Butternut seems to really get disease where we are. Um, so it remains to be seen. And those sorts of questions, sometimes it's like 10 years or 20 years before you start to really see that. So we're casting a wide net. We're going to plant a lot more. Um, but I can't speak to how reliable they're going to be as far as disease or issues like that. They grow super fast, which is pretty awesome. We're lucky enough to be near an arboretum that has a collection of all these different trees, and I think we have permission to pick them up off the ground. Nobody, the squirrels do, so we do too. And they're on a good year, they're really productive. They're not annual. Our observation, they have not been heavy annual croppers. They feel to be on a 3-year pulse um, overall. The heart nut being really on a much longer pulse. So Japanese walnut would be one to explore. Um, if I were to put more effort into any of them, it'd probably be that tree. Is there more for you?
Oh, I'm going down this list.
Okay.
Lance Heiskell. Love to see more about biochar. Practical ways to create biochar in the backyard. Can we do the hotel pan method with a backyard fire pit?
Cool. And you got an
This one
AM
we already did.
AM Leonard 6-time fork for Christmas. Congratulations, Lance. I love it. Biochar. I think I'll probably be brief here and then follow up on this. There's a lot of interest in having more updates on what we're doing biochar wise. This winter, almost entirely, our biochar has been happening in our wood stove, and that's with those hotel
Add to the
pans.
fire.
Yeah. Um, Backyard biochar. Look into cone pit method. We've made videos about that. There's lots of other videos too. Um, I would not encourage using a hotel pan in a backyard fire pit. It just wouldn't be that efficient. Research, either watch our videos or look at other folks with the cone pit method. You can dig into the ground and make a conical pit and create a fire where you manage it a certain way, and that helps facilitate creating lots and lots of charcoal, which is all covered in those videos. The cone pit method, and there's something called the cone tiki cone, Kontiki cone. And we've also trialed a local metal fabricator made us a cone pit like kiln that is this basically metal conical kiln that stands above ground, which is really nice for doing charcoal outdoors in the winter months when it's like super wet and snowy soils where we are. But certainly you can do biochar in your backyard and try it small amounts and just see how it works. Have lots of water around to be safe. And we'll do some videos on biochar because it's a pretty important part of our whole system at this point, and I feel like we've got lots of bits that we can share on that. Um,
Someone said they have to have a plate full of hot dogs and an apron on when making biochar. The local fire department has a fit.
oh, there you go. I'm not sure about that. Yeah, I guess if
Have you
you.
ever had any problems when you?
I've never had any problems, but where I do the charcoal is in a really rural context. It's out in the woods, and people have lots of burns out there. And I think if you're doing charcoal production in an outdoor context and you're creating huge amounts of smoke, you're doing things worse than you could be. There's ways to manage the flame where it's a very clean, very hot, relatively pure flame. I'm not saying I get it that way all the time, but it's definitely attainable if you dry your material correctly and you manage the fire right to have it be just fire, no flame. Um, just fire, no smoke. I realized just fire. I said just fire, no flame, and then it rolled around in my head like no, no,
No,
no. It's
no, no.
something different than that. All right.
Earth Mother Farm asks, "What's your ideal and easy setup right now to start the majority of your nursery plants and trees? Outdoor air prune beds, indoor pots, etc. I'm especially talking about winter hardy shrubs and trees. Ideal and easy." You probably
Okay. So what's the easiest way, best way to start most of our nursery trees plant? Um, I don't know if there's a single method that I feel like, oh yeah, it's definitely this. Uh, Air prune boxes, which we've talked about it pretty extensively in various videos, and you can find them. Incredibly beneficial for facilitating if the tree has a tap root. So any nut tree really, and a lot of other trees too, but nut trees in particular, if there is a tap root and rodents would be really interested in eating young seeds or saplings of those trees, then air prune boxes are just miracles in how well they work. Um, but I don't know, we have really limited water time and access. So putting cuttings right in the ground and letting them grow, or putting seeds right in the ground in rich soil and mulching, that's kind of nice. Um, Indoor pots or potted growth, I wouldn't say is anywhere on our list of ideal. I don't like to do that. Um, so yeah, air prune box is pretty rad, and straight in the ground and letting them grow, it just takes a lot of pressure off of our management.
except if rabbits or the dogs get them.
Yeah, now we've got 2 dogs, and they are turning out to be really interested in pulling on things that are tree-like, and so
Including electrical wires.
yeah, that we're working out the kinks of getting all that figured out. Um, but yeah, air prune boxes are pretty wonderful. And what I wouldn't encourage people that are just getting into growing trees from seed is to say the only way to grow them is in air prune boxes. Try it. If you don't have the time and energy to build air prune boxes, awesome. Plant trees directly into the ground and just see what happens. But yeah, air prune boxes are nice if you can get to that. You're doing. Is this very boring?
What?
You're yawning.
I'm sorry.
No.
I was just getting tired.
No, so I realized it might not be that exciting.
I was trying to mask it. I was getting tired.
But I could see you in the screen. That's how I knew.
I was getting
All right, we got 2 more questions here. Let's do this one for you.
What time is it? How do I get tired this
It's
early?
almost 8.
It's almost
Hey, it's getting late. It's getting late.
my bedtime. Oh gosh. I'll try it.
It's fine. So yeah, we got
Quercus.
sure.
What do you do with plants that wind up growing too large in your nursery? Do you manage to plant them all out on your property?
Um we
You dig a ton up all the time of like really huge plants.
Yeah, we're often playing catch up with nursery stock that we just didn't get around to in time, and so we're digging out like 4 foot and 6 foot tall chestnuts and persimmons, and sometimes like 10 foot tall trees, and moving them around. It's not ideal. I don't love. In a way, it's like neat to be able to put these huge trees and they're already above deer browse, but then you have to dig a lot and dig deeper, bigger holes. So in an ideal scenario, we keep up with things each year. We try to like dig up all the plants that are in a nursery bed and move them along and figure that out. Um, but uh, yeah, we sometimes we manage to plant them all out on our property. It's interesting that your name is Quercus because what comes to mind is we have some areas where there were some oaks that were in a nursery context a bunch of years ago in a few different beds and just never got around to digging them. And now they're like 15 feet tall. And so we've given up on that whole area being in nursery rotational production, and now it's going to be a stand of beautiful white oaks with other. We'll just keep adding other trees now. So there's something sweet about saying if you can't keep up with the rate of growth of the trees, maybe give up on trying to control them and reset them, and just start letting it move up into succession and then start another nursery space somewhere else. So we're doing that more and more now. It's like it's nursery for a while until the trees are just too many, too big, and then okay, cool. We're just going to let that become a food forest
But
now.
eventually, you won't have anywhere to have a nursery.
Right. And eventually,
You won't want to be a nursery anymore because
right.
you won't have the physical space.
Right. And so it's like we just keep pioneering all these new spots that can be, annual crop production and early successional rotational nursery, blah, blah, blah. And then, yeah, by the time I'm like 60, another 20 years or so of doing that, everywhere will have escaped management into being a diverse, complex food forest, and we can switch into just hanging out in a food forest all the time. And maybe there'll be an economy or maybe there won't. And I could imagine in 20 years there quite
I don't know what we're in for in this
quite
world,
possibly
where
won't
it's
be.
headed, but yeah, I can imagine
But
things are going to be kind of pretty funky.
but really dense, diverse food forests, I would not mind no matter what the economic picture of the future is. Um,
Um,
one more.
this is, I stopped yawning. It was like
It
once I
was a
yawned,
moment.
no, I yawned one time, and then it's like it set like a pattern in my brain that just I had to keep yawning.
I know.
It wasn't you
I
were
went to
there.
school. I know I
You
know
were.
about yawning.
East Nashville Food Forest would be interested in hearing about your routine for a day, maybe any given day in the life or typical timing of chores. Um, it kind of depends on the winter, or spring, or summer. It depends on the time of year. Right,
Well, what's
right
happening now?
now, it's just like we get up. Sean does the fire usually. One of us makes coffee. I let the chickens out and give them like preliminary food. And then Sean goes back out a little bit later and turns a bunch of compost for them. I feed the animals, the cats and dogs, which actually is more of a production than one would think.
Yeah.
Um,
While you're feeding the animals, it's when I like to sit down with coffee, and that's generally the window where I'll try to engage with all the comments, which has been really wonderful to try to keep up with, but also like um it's a little it's a job in a sweet way. But yeah, that's the window is like with coffee, sit down, answer as many questions as possible.
and then,
Then from there the day goes in some direction. um
well,
but
it'd probably be more interesting for people in the spring. Then it's a different day in the life than today. Then it's like, yeah, I don't know.
I think in the winter we tend to get it. We have like pretty easy rhythms that repeat each day because it's the similar type of weather, similar things. And in the spring, it moves. It's that same basic start, and then it's just like so many different things are happening between opening up the greenhouses and high tunnels and watering and like every week within the first few months of the growing season there's just tons and tons to do and they're all slightly different things. um, but yeah, that's we've somehow the days manage to zip right on by. We try to wake up on the early side. We try to go to bed on the early side. And our
Tonight we're gonna have popcorn after this.
Oh yeah, we're having popcorn, and we'll find some sort of trash on Netflix maybe, or something
No.
meaningful and
We're
thoughtful.
watching dog training videos, remember?
Yeah, but those aren't that fun.
We
Watching a dog training video while you're laying in bed eating popcorn doesn't really do much because the dogs are just laying there. So we try to remember.
we got 2 dog training videos from the library, and we started to watch one. We have a long way to
We have a long way to go. Yep. Um, so these are
That's all those questions.
these are the questions that we initially got from our members from a month ago, and thank you so much for sharing those with us. Um, Yeah, and again, it seems important to acknowledge, first of all, how much we appreciate all of you being part of this. If you're someone who watches the channel infrequently and you don't subscribe, but you like the channel once in a while, that's awesome. Thanks for being around. If you're subscribing and like engaging, it's Lenny. There's special Lenny. We're
I
gonna
think he
train him. We're gonna train. Anyway, this is Lenny, who you may have met in past videos, and man, did this dude thicken up since then.
He's gotten really a lot bigger, but he likes to be held like a
He still likes to be held.
baby.
And we got George laying over there, who would not like to be held.
And we have 5 cats, so everybody's just hanging in here right now.
A lot of creatures, 90 some odd chickens, 10 or 20,000 some odd trees and shrubs. But yeah, and
I
then
think he has to use the bathroom.
it may be time. But yeah, in particular, thank you to the members who have directly financially supported us. The YouTube channel, it's really rad that it's grown the way it has over the years. And I have no intention of stopping. I think it'll probably be around spring that it gets much harder to make a couple videos a week and do that kind of thing. But we try to make a lot of videos. We try to comment a whole lot or respond to comments and be helpful to people. And so when people support us in that way, it really helps keep that going. And now here's Stan.
Now showing off.
We'll get each of the animals
This
over.
is Stan.
That's Stanley. But yeah, it's been cool. It's been neat. Our main livelihood is the nursery, and that works for us. And for those of you that have ordered from us, thank you so much. But yeah, YouTube has evolved slowly but surely, and without like asking much of people. It's just naturally moving in this direction that it's a solid living wage side income for us. I know one of the questions asked about our financial picture, and so I wanted to touch on that a little bit. So for those of you that are supporting us directly, it feels super rad and really appreciate it. And feel free to reach out directly.
He
That's the
doesn't want to
understand.
be. He's done.
Especially the members. Are there ways that you would like to see? Like, what would you like more of as thank yous for being a member? Are there things that we could be doing that would be more exciting and keeping it feeling engaging to stay as members? I know I asked that in the past, and a lot of folks said, "Oh, we're just happy to support," and that's great. But I think answering direct questions for members, it feels nice, and we'll do these more and more. But maybe there's some other creative, thoughtful ideas that folks have, so don't hesitate to ask or
Rob
to
B
share.
asked if we still have bowl issues with the cats, and indeed we do.
Yeah, we've got 5 cats. The voles are out in the garden, and only 1 or 2 of the cats go out there. And that Stanley, as you just saw, is a
He's one of them. He
He's a-
goes and he does. He is a good hunter, but the others are not too great at
yeah. And most of our vole pressure at this point is in the high tunnels where the cats don't go. And so we do have traps in there, and that's not really awesome or ideal. We'd like to figure out better pathways for that, but for now, it's what we're doing with that.
And someone said they try to get plants, but it seems like everything's always sold out. If that is the case, like you have certain plants that you're hoping for and it does all say sold out, you can send an email to hello@edibleacres.org, and I answer those emails. And because a lot of times we do have the plants, but we kind of have to set the numbers somewhere. So you can see if you can check in if you want to.
And we should mention On the website, it says this, but if you're interested in bare root plants for this spring, for spring 2023, we will, I'll update the inventory for March 1st. Um, and I don't know, I uh, wish it could be different, but it's just the way it is there's a huge amount of demand for the plants. It's so awesome in one way. It feels really reassuring and amazing that there is so much demand for really hardy perennial food bearing plants. So thank you all for planting them. But then on the flip side is that we're small. It's Sasha and I and our friend Juan,
Sasha and me.
Sasha and me and it's I and Sasha as well as Juan. Uh, I
No, but
love that
no,
correction.
sorry.
Oh,
No, it's
my
fine.
favorite.
No, and I'm reading this. Yeah, I told myself I wasn't gonna ever do that again.
Well, but here's an opportunity.
I was trained to do it by my mom.
By me mom. By I mom. Um, but yes, we're a small nursery is what I'm trying to say. And what we run out of first, the reality of limiting factors, which is like a concept in permaculture, I think is very real, is and something to acknowledge. I think with some of the systems that we're within and political and international blah blah blah, like limiting factor as a concept doesn't generally apply to systems, and so a lot of things get really unhealthy and out of hand because of that. For us, our limiting factor by a long shot is our physical and temporal capacity to fulfill orders for shipping. We're just small, and we want to be able to also grow a lot of the food that we eat. We want to make videos and share notes on things, and we want to plant our own gardens out. So um, I will absolutely this year, once we're sold out in the spring, March 2nd, March 3rd, whenever that is, make a follow up video that promotes other nurseries that we really believe in. And you can check out, it's edibleacres.org/permaculture dash nurseries, or just poke around the website. Has a list of other small scale and ethical nurseries that we really believe in. And you can email us and add some other ones, or add yours if you're a small nursery and you want to get more plants out into the world. Let us know. Um, so yeah. Wow, you folks are wonderful. I'm poking around here, looking at some of these comments, and I wish we could respond to each and all of you. Um, I hope you can trust if you're writing things. If we don't see them right at this moment, we'll poke back through and look at them. And any comments that people make on videos, pretty much across the board. Once in a while, I'll miss a few here or there, but we try to read every single comment, and we try to answer every question. Um, so yeah,
Let me just look it up.
cool.
Oh, and we're gonna say goodbye.
I think we're getting close to a say goodbye moment. Let us know. Maybe you can comment. Are there topics for these live sessions that you would really like to see? I think I might try to do something as like a biochar question answer, or another chicken, like a winter compost chicken question and answer session. Are there other topics that you would want to see covered? Um, Let us know, and we'll try to be helpful in that way. Other than that, thank you for spending an hour with us this evening. And I think, yeah, thank you for those of you that gave the thumbs up. I never ask for that. Like, smash that like. Feels like such a weird thing. But I do think in the future, if we do these live things, um, when people hit the thumbs up button, I think it helps get the live sessions out to a wider audience. So if you feel encouraged to do that in the future, probably would have been helpful for me to ask that at the beginning, but just keep it in mind for another session. And again, thanks everybody. Do you have anything else to say, or have I rambled enough to fill a whole evening?
Thank you. I appreciate all the hearts for the Stanley and Lenny and everybody. Oh, you're still making soap. I know. I was wondering if we should put that soap video back up. For some reason,
I think I did.
Oh, you did? I thought I didn't do a very good job. I wanted him to take the video down, but that's cool that you're making soap from that video.
That's pretty much the only soap we use for our bodies, for our hands and
Thank
bodies.
you. Okay,
Hey,
we're wrapping it up here.
we're gonna enjoy our popcorn and dog treat videos. Hey, Kim. Hey,
Thank
welcome to
you.
the herbaceous layer. Cool, folks. Have a lovely evening. Thank you so much for being part of all this, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.
What a dream.
Mhm.